One legend that will never die in my household is Ken Griffey Jr. Now, I'm not from Seattle, not from Cincinnati. Cincinnati? Cincinnati? I'm not from Cincinnati. So it's not for that catch. It's not for the hundreds of home runs. It's not even for saying, why should I stretch? Does a cheetah stretch before it goes and chases its prey? I mean, he missed about 300 games in 4 seasons, so he probably should have done that just like one time. Just one. But it wasn't for any of that. It was for his contribution to video games. And that contribution is Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey.
Home run!
So it wasn't my first time entering the world of video baseball. That would go to World Series Baseball 95 on the Sega Genesis. I am that old. Check it. And while I'll play games since then, Triple Play, MVP Baseball, Slugfest, numerous MLB The Shows, there's always something special about this game. There's always something that brings me back to it. Keeps me coming back for more. Like the endless buffet. Now, Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr. was slated for a late 1997 release, but was delayed a few months and came out in May of 98. In all of that time, they couldn't come up with a shorter title for the damn game. It must have been the last thing they were doing before lunch on a Friday, and they're just like, sure, screw it. Just, that's the game. Screw it. Fine.
Great play, kid.
Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr. was developed by Angel Studio, who before this made Echo, Tides of Time, and Mr. Bones for Sega. This was their first game being developed for the Nintendo 64. And they would go on afterward to make Ken Griffey Jr. Slugfest. Got it right that time. And then the Resident Evil 2 Nintendo 64 port. Now, Angel Studios would get high upon themselves, become Rockstar San Diego, which obviously everyone knows Rockstar San Diego is famous for Rockstar table tennis. Maybe it was those cowboy games. Anyway, it was also published by Nintendo, who made Yoshi Story, so the less said about that, the better.
Home run!
So this game is an arcade-style baseball game. So the game modes are going to be various different amounts of playing baseball games. And there are 4 main game modes: Exhibition, Season Mode, World Series, and Home Run Derby. Now, Exhibition, World Series, and Home Run Derby are very straightforward game modes. Exhibition is just one-off games. You're going to play it against your friend or against the computer or against an enemy. I don't know. I don't know your life. I don't know what you do in your own house. World Series is very similar to Exhibition, except that you're going to play the 4 to 7 most important games of a baseball season in a row. It's going to keep stats. It's going to give out awards. So that's really fun. You get to become World Series champions. Great. And then Home Run Derby is exactly what it is. It's Home Run Derby. You're trying to hit as many home runs as you can. Season mode is the game mode that has the most length to it. Here you can play every game of a team season or only a few of them. This game introduced me to the world of fantasy drafting. I can pick my team from any player I want. I can make the most stacked team possible. Now, being a kid and not watching much baseball outside of like Braves baseball, because everyone can watch Braves baseball, or Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa, out of the big names, there was those guys. I didn't really know who all of the good players were. So for the dumb kids who didn't know any better, and then for the people who are coming back after over 20 years, how you'd be able to figure out who the best players are or who the players you want to get are is you would just tab all the way over past each and every position, and you would find league leaders for all of the major 90s categories. Now, I say 90s categories, so you're not getting BABIP, you're not getting WHIP, you're not getting ERA plus, you're not getting OPS plus, you're not getting any of those sabermetrics. You're getting home runs, average, RBIs, hits, strikeouts, wins, innings pitched, and even saved. So it made it nice for everybody to at least have a good enough team to play. You're also able to make trades after this fantasy draft. So if you didn't get a player you wanted, or if you're doing it without a fantasy draft, you can do trades. There was a sports wire that kept track of stats. It kept track of standings. You could see who your next people were. You could see how the games of the day came out, what the results of those were. All of it was in there. Made it very fun. Very complete experience. Now, compared to other baseball games that came out for the Nintendo 64, and yes, I said other baseball games that came out for the Nintendo 64, there was a time where 3 different baseball games came out in the same year for the same console. So this game wasn't the best graphically, and it wasn't the best for gameplay. It wasn't even the best for modes. All that went to All-Star Baseball 99, when the world was in Acclaim's loving hands. The 90s were a strange time. Now, the other game that the third game in this trifecta that came out that year was Mike Piazza's Strike Zone. And this game came out. So, yeah.
Strike 3.
So, where Major League Baseball, featuring Ken Griffey Jr., found its place was being the arcade game that had character. What this game became most praised for was for its soundtrack, its sound effects. It made you feel like you were at a baseball game where people actually liked baseball. This was the 90s, so people did like baseball. There was an announcer that would come, welcome the player to the game.
Good evening and welcome to Fenway Park. In today's game, it's the New York Yankees versus the Boston Red Sox.
Introduced the batters as they made their way to the box.
Leadoff batter, the shortstop, Nomar Garciaparra.
They would give commentary on home run balls. This is what we got instead of what Matty V did.
Home run.
The announcer would even roast the home team if they were losing badly in front of their own fans.
Out. The fans are going home.
In addition to the announcer, you would also have the cover man himself, Ken Griffey Jr., had his own commentary lines. He had gems like this.
Got him.
Obviously, being the cover athlete of the game, and with it featuring him, Ken Griffey Jr. got his perks. He got the commentary role. He was the color commentator. He would get his own walk-up music. No matter if it was home or away, he would get his own special walk-up music that only played for him. In this game, there are 7 batting stances. There's standard, there's crouched, there's tall, there's closed, there's open. Those are the 5 ones that are shared between 99% of all players. The two that got their own batting stance was Ken Griffey Jr. and Brady Anderson. This was coming around the time of Brady Anderson having his best power number of his career, so they gave him a little bit of shine. So since it was an arcade game, the controls are very, very simple. You put your reticle over the ball and you hit the swing button. All there is to it. All you have to really do is learn the timing of it. But once you did, that's really all the challenge you got. There was no difficulty in the game. The more controls you learned and mastered, the easier the game became. It's kind of how things work, The more practice you get, better you get. But in sports games, once you get good at a certain level, you'll move on to the next difficulty to keep the challenge alive. So once you get a handle on the way the game plays, your final scores kind of end up like this.
Out. And the winners are the Chicago White Sox.
Can I just say, too, that Albert Bell in that game was an absolute monster. So I mentioned a lot about the batting in the game because it is Ken Griffey Jr. And it's the 90s where offense is king. But pitchers had something to do as well. They had their own quirks. Each of them had 4 pitches. They had a fastball, a changeup, a slider or a curveball, or a screwball for those weird guys. And then they would have their own special pitch. Obviously, that would depend on the pitcher. So for guys like Randy Johnson and Pedro Martinez, they had a super fastball. You would press Z and B to do. For the guys on the opposite end of the spectrum, they would have a super changeup that would go about 40 miles an hour in there. The other 2 pitches were for the split finger guys like Greg Maddux, and then the knuckleball like Tim Wake. So obviously the sound and the gameplay were definitely unique qualities of this game. But there were a few things that I always liked about it. Obviously, I'm talking about it. And obviously, if I'm playing MLB The Show or MVP Baseball or any of these other games that I mentioned, and I'm still coming back to this one, there has to be a few things that I like. The first thing that I liked was in season mode and home run derby. Since this was played on the N64, all of any kind of movie or anything like that would be rendered in-game. So any video that would come would be rendered in the game. In season mode and home run derby, when you're selecting your team in season mode, or when you're selecting your player in home run derby, a guy will come out in the top right corner of the screen and he'll model the jersey. He'll go through all 3 variants: the home, the alternate, and the away jersey. So along with the modeling the jersey, when you go into setting your lineups, on the right-hand corner of the screen, you have your player that you're using. The player that you're selecting and moving around in the lineup, he would be in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and he would have some sort of unique characteristic to him. So they would have their unique characteristic not only in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, but if you press Z, you essentially are viewing their player card. And on that player card, they would have a unique code using this player model. Now, I thought this was cool, albeit kind of useless. And even, that's kind of what most of this stuff is. It's all stuff that's kind of cool, albeit a little bit useless. The other thing that I discovered later, when I would, in one of my many turns back to the game, is that you can actually light fireworks in the game. And so how you would do this is you would select your team, select your lineup. Then when you go to select the stadium, you can press Z again. And you can actually walk around the entire empty stadium. And if you go to home plate and you press Z and R together, you would have fireworks coming out. Really kind of cool. Albeit useless, but it adds time to the game. And stuff blows up. Kind of cool. So obviously, if it's a game I come back to, I play a couple games, I get my rush of nostalgia, and then I put it down till the next time I get that yearning for it. It's obviously not one of the best games ever made. It was some of my earliest memories playing baseball games. And since they're the earliest, they're therefore some of the most important memories I have. Heck, even on the days where I actually hit home runs in real baseball, I vividly remember playing this game and hitting home runs with Tony Gwynn. And if you've ever played this game using a guy who's primarily contact, hitting home runs with Tony Gwynn is not common. So, I think for any baseball fan, you should go and pick this up. At least play it a little bit. If you can't find the cartridge, I'm sure there's other ways to play it. Even the Mets scoreboard, the Mets video board, during a rain delay, threw it on and started playing it. Obviously, I'm not the only one who misses this game, who thought that this game was very fun. And I think it's perfect for baseball fans to go back and play as some of the best stars of the 90s. Guys like Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, Ken Griffey Jr., Alex Rodriguez before he started saying dumb stuff in the radio booth, Nomar Garciaparra, even the pitchers like Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, Roger Clemens, Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, and even Orioles hero, Brady Anderson.
Out.
It's showtime. Call me Junior. Call me Junior. Call me Junior. Call me Junior.